Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode by a time, season by season. We're now on episode 13 of season 7, on the aptly titled episode, Somebody Hates Raymond. Well, it only took 7 seasons to use that title. Now, before I get too far into it, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. PayPal if you want to just do a one-off support or one-off request, and Patreon if you want to continuously support the channel and be able to suggest topics for future videos. Now, I don't think I've mentioned it with Season 7 yet, because the little break and all that, but this is the season where we actually start getting a song intro besides, stuff that's in the public domain like Beethoven. Because Jungle Love, which was used at the end of an episode prior, is now the opening theme, which is only for this season, if I remember right, which is a shame. I mean, it would have been nice to continue along, but probably the song licensing and all that, that's all they were able to get for it. But it is a nice little opening for it, just using clips from the previous seasons and, of course, ending with the dance. Now, this episode is a Steve Skrovan written episode. Now, here is the synopsis on IMDb, and it pretty much sums up the whole episode. Andy's new boss hates Ray. Ray does everything he can to find out why. Now, it's been a while since we've seen Andy in this show. And if you're watching these episodes in sequence, you're wondering, okay, did they just forget the character? Drop the character entirely? Or is, his actor, Andy Kindler, a little too busy? Kindler, excuse me. Probably a little bit of both, but they finally brought him back in, and apparently he no longer works at the paper with Ray. Why, they never address, so it's like an unanswered question. I'm guessing maybe he decided he wanted to try something different, or it could be just something his plan is. He got fired. Who knows? But anyway, Andy's at a new job. He's working for a radio guy named Jerry Musso, who's played by character actor Steve Vinovich, who I personally remember from childhood as the voice of Puffin and the Swan Princess. And of course, he was also in an episode of Deep Space Nine. So another guest actor who we find was in an episode of Deep Space Nine. Not as prolific as the last one we mentioned, but another one. Now, Andy is working for Jerry to help book people on the show, and of course, Ray, with how he is, he decides, I'll volunteer, I'll throw him a bone. Well, as Andy says when he comes back in, well, sorry, Ray, I'm afraid I'm going to have to return your bone. Because apparently Jerry Musso, for whatever reason, does not like Ray. Now, with how far into the show we are, how well we know the character of Ray Barone, you can already see where this is going. Ray, for whatever reason, just cannot fathom that someone does not like him. Which I get. There are some people who could look at a situation and be like, how could someone not like me? Like, outside of maybe work, when I have to tell people they got to leave property or they don't like the answer I give them, even though it's policy or something. In that situation, I can understand people not liking me. But other ones, I can't really. Well, that's just me looking at it. There could be people for outside stuff that don't like me. There's only a handful of people I could tell you that I've actually met in person that, worked with and all that I did not like. I'm not going to go into it, but it has happened. But I still am professional work with them. And this one, it's like, how could Jerry not like Ray? Now, throughout the whole episode, off and on, Ray is wondering, why does Jerry not like me? What could it be? He goes from it. He talks with Deborah about it, and she's like, Ray. And that basically sums up Deborah's whole thing, where she's like, Ray, I get it. You don't know why he doesn't like you. Just don't dwell on it. And, of course, when he goes over to talk with his parents, Ray brings it up. Peter Boyle, as Frank, is a little indifferent to it, because he's like, yeah, I don't care. He's trying to eat his lasagna there in between commercials. Joking about it. He's like, yeah, because he's talking to you, Marie. And then Marie's the typical mother stuff, like, how could Jerry not like you? Oh, my God, nobody should not like you, Ray. Oh. And, of course, when Robert comes in, he's all like, really? And he channels, essentially, what at this point in the show's production history, a good portion of us are probably thinking about how Ray's going on in this. Does it ever occur to you that there's someone in this vast cosmos of ours that thinks you suck? So Ray and Robert get into a little fight here about hate. I hate you. No, I hate you. I hate you. Marie, trying to play little referee there. And this is one of the moments about this episode, other than the end part, that I do remember. because of it being included in the blooper reel, and that is that Robert and Ray, when they're going at each other, one of them accidentally pushes the lasagna tray up, and it goes right into Marie's chest. And I just love how Doris Robert plays this when she's still holding it. You can tell she's selling it a little bit. And it's not until the boys storm out that she brings it down. And we got all the cheese and sauce all over her chest. Now, there's two different lines that Frank says here, and both of them Peter Boyle just sells magnificently. And for the one in the final episode, this is another instance where you could tell that Peter Boyle's heart attacks at his age are catching up with him a little bit because of a little bit of the back notes in his voice. For the earlier part, he still has energy, but so I'm guessing from that is probably once he's done a good amount of takes and his energy level starts to go down, then you start to notice it more. At least in this season. In the final episode, he's like, I gotta say, Marie, I'm a little excited. Which is funny. You can see why that one was chosen. I think the one in the blooper reel is funnier, and when you hear what it is, you'll see why. And that line is, hey, Marie, I know you named him, but I didn't know you fed him. I can't help but laugh just talking about it. You can kind of see why that one was on the cutting room floor, because funny, but probably not right enough for television. It's like that one blooper line that Peter said before, where the line was, that's why Ray has a cannoli on his ass, but for one take he accidentally said, that's why Ray has a cannoli up his ass. But it got a loud reaction. Funny, but not right for network television. If it was on HBO, they probably could have got away with it. Now, Ray and Andy end up at the Jerry Musso mixer thing. Ray trying to figure out why. Robert's there. But he's mainly there trying to get the little memo signed by Jerry. Anyway, they find Jerry, and you could tell from how Steve plays it that Jerry's just trying to save face in front of Ray and trying to like kiss his ass, but there's little subtleties like how he rolls his eyes and all that in character Ray picks up on and asks him about it. And Jerry insults Ray to his face, where he's all like, oh, I guess it just shows you don't have to be smart to have a career in this business. And he's like, because I just don't get it. Which, that's one of those instances where he's like, I just don't get it. Like, he could have been polite about it. It's like, well, all due respect, Ray, I just don't get your appeal. It's just not for me. So, maybe hate's a strong word, but I just don't get it. And in that instance, I can get it. I mean, there's things I've mentioned on here throughout the years about certain crazes I really don't get, like, personally. Like, I didn't really get the appeal of Twilight, even during the height of the craze, because I read the first book. I was more a fan of the side story with the dad in that first book than I was with hers. The first two movies, I wasn't really a big fan of them. Thought the adult actors did a pretty good job, but the ones playing the mains is like, yeah. And also probably didn't help with how that film was lit and all that, but that was just my opinion on it. Even though I will say that one of the vampire characters I really did buy as a vampire just because of the way she looked at the camera. Or like, she's going to rip my throat out, isn't she? And there's other stuff like, I don't really get the full-on appeal of Nashville country. I mean, I like more raw, stripped-down one. I mean, I like some songs of the Nashville one, but as a whole, it's like, it's pop with twang, essentially. And some pop music I also don't get the appeal of. There's lots of other stuff. And as I've said it before and say again, outside of when it was released, and maybe for the demographic it was intended for when it came out, I don't really get the appeal of a film like, say, Rosemary's Baby. I mean, I get the shock factor of the few moments people talk about, but it's just not for me. So in that regard, I can see why Jerry would be like that. But then turning it into an insult like that, that's part of the reason I don't really take a lot of the opinions of like shock jocks and all that with a grain of, I take it with a grain of salt. I mean, if they say something funny, I'll laugh at it. I'm not going to give the names, but if you know the people on radio like that, it's like, yeah, unless they're talking about a field where they're actually an expert in, like, yeah, I'll take it with a grain of salt. Or if they're just being a jerk, like, yeah. And then, of course, you all know my opinions on a certain duo of film critics that are no longer with us. Because you all know my feelings on that, but just to touch on it a little bit, like Siskel and Ebert, for those of you who couldn't guess already. Most of the time, unless it's like a highfalutin film, they just seem to always have an axe to grind with it. Like with horror, unless it was like a highbrow horror film like The Exorcist, a little bit of the original Halloween and all that, they always lambasted it. And I believe it was Ebert who walked out famously on the movie Maniac, the original one. And then, of course, his scathing review of the first Friday the 13th, where he printed Betsy Palmer's address because he was so mad at her. It was like stuff like that. I'll be comparing to Jerry here, and it's like, really, there's no need for that. You could say you don't like a film, you don't think it's your cup of tea, you're not really a fan of this genre, but there's no reason to label the insults. I mean, even in a film you hate, unless, of course, you're playing it up just for the jokes thing, like, say you're doing a character and all that, that's different. Unless it's something that really is really insulting, like a certain moment in a Serbian film. That is really insulting. Or if you just think the whole film as a whole is insulting, I guess. No, North is probably the only one that comes to mind there, but there's not really too many films I could think of where I'd say the whole film is just an insult like that. Unless it's one of those films that in one context you could say it's being self-aware, like Confederate States of America, but if it was made by somebody else who actually believes in the cause and all that, it could be considered a actual one. But then again, there are films like that. Birth of a Nation. But to get back on track, there's no reason for Jerry to be that much of an insult thing. You kind of make the argument that Ray brought it on himself because he was really pushing it with Jerry, and Jerry's just doing it, telling him that because he's a little upset, which is the case. But at the same time, it's like, why would Jerry think of it to the point where it's like the whole thing about the insult with the intelligence and all that? Unless, even if it's in the moment and all that, it's like, how would you know he's not smart, Jerry? I mean, we've seen that Ray has his flaws, but you can't say he doesn't have some intelligence. He just maybe a little oblivious and stuff in other contexts. It just is like that other radio jock where they just because they don't like the column, they think you're stupid, but and stuff like that. Like in my things, I will say, like just because Kristen Stewart and I can't remember, and Robert were in Twilight, that they can't act. I mean, Robert I thought was an excellent Batman in his film, so I'm not going to say he can't act. Just he was in what I consider a bad movie. Now, Ray, of course, is, to go back onto the story track, he was pretty hurt by the comments, and then Robert comes in to defend him. A nice little brotherly moment, and it does end on a good note where Ray's talking with Deborah and all that, so it does have a good, happy ending-ish to the episode. As you can tell a little bit with how I'm talking about it, this has been one of the episodes I usually skip. And watching it again, I'll say it's still on the skip list, just not as much as it was before. Unlike some of the other episodes where I see myself watching it a bit more, this one, probably watching it a little bit more than I was already, but probably still have to be in the mood for it. Because it's one of those ones that, like, yeah, the people doing the unadulterated Ray hate and thing like that, Steve's performance and all that, yeah, I'd rather not watch that every single time. But if you really want to see Ray get put in his place by another character that's not connected to the family for some of the stuff we've seen him do and what we see him do in the scene where they meet, then I can say definitely watch it. But me, I'll just skip ahead to the next episode, which continues the Robert and Amy reunion arc. That is basically the main arc for the rest of this season, because as I mentioned before, we are now getting to the part where Robert and Amy are actually going to tie the knot, and that story arc actually begins in the next episode, which is called Just a Formality. And as you can tell from it, it involves proposing, but not just any proposing. It's a concept which I personally consider to be outdated, and that is asking for the parents' blessing to have, usually the daughters, hand in marriage. But for my full thoughts on that, you'll have to wait till next time. Till then, everybody.